Welcome to Mind Decoded, where we explore the psychology behind human behavior. Let's decode today's topic. Your brain makes a complete judgment about someone in 100 milliseconds. Before they finish their first sentence. Before you know anything real about them. And that judgment is wrong. Not sometimes wrong, systematically wrong. Neuroscientist Alexander Todorov at Princeton found that people form impressions of trustworthiness, competence, and likability from a face in 1/10 of a second. And those snap judgments predict almost nothing about the person's actual character. Your brain is running pattern matching software designed to detect threats in prehistoric environments. But you're using it to evaluate job candidates, choose romantic partners, and decide who to trust. The hardware is outdated, and it's costing you. Here's what nobody tells you about reading people. Your brain doesn't see people accurately. It sees its own projections. When you meet someone new, your brain immediately searches for similar patterns from your past. Similar face shape, similar tone of voice, similar mannerisms. Then it pulls up the associated memories and emotions from those past experiences and projects them onto this new person. Psychologist Nicholas Epley calls this egocentric bias. You're not reading them, you're reading yourself, your history, your associations, your fears and preferences. The person standing in front of you is essentially invisible. You're interacting with a mental construction built from your own database. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or mental health advice. If you're experiencing mental health concerns, please consult with a qualified mental health professional. Let's start with the fundamental attribution error. Social psychologist Lee Ross discovered that when you watch someone behave, your brain automatically attributes their behavior to their personality rather than their situation. Someone cuts you off in traffic, your brain concludes they're a selfish person. You cut someone off in traffic, your brain knows you were distracted because you're late to an important meeting. Same behavior, different attribution. When it's someone else, you blame their character. When it's you, you cite circumstances. This asymmetry destroys accurate social perception. You're systematically overestimating how much behavior reveals about personality and underestimating how much it reveals about context. The neuroscience explains why. When you observe someone, your brain's theory of mind network activates. This includes the medial prefrontal cortex and temporal parietal junction. These regions try to infer what the person is thinking and feeling based on their behavior. But here's the problem. Your brain has direct access to your own thoughts, feelings, and circumstances. When you act, you know the full context. When someone else acts, you only see the behavior. No context, no internal state, just visible action. So your brain fills in the missing information using stereotypes, past experiences, and guesses. Most of which are wrong. Projection bias makes this worse. You assume other people think and feel the way you do. Psychologist Roy Baumeister studied egocentric empathy gaps. When you're hungry, you overestimate how much other people care about food. When you're anxious, you see anxiety in neutral faces. When you're suspicious, you interpret ambiguous behavior as threatening. Your current emotional state colors everything you perceive. You're not seeing the other person's emotions. You're seeing your emotions reflected back at you. This is why the same person seems different to you on different days. They haven't changed. Your internal state changed, so your perception changed. The halo effect corrupts everything. Psychologist Edward Thorndike discovered that if you perceive someone as attractive, competent in one area, or similar to you, your brain automatically assumes they have other positive qualities. Attractive people are judged as more intelligent, trustworthy, and capable than equally qualified unattractive people. People who agree with you politically are assumed to be more moral and rational than people who disagree. One positive trait creates a halo that makes you see virtues that aren't there. Neuroscientist Alexander Todorov's research found that people rated as having trustworthy faces in photos are no more trustworthy in actual behavior than people rated as having untrustworthy faces. The judgment is pure illusion. But your brain treats it as fact. Confirmation bias locks in first impressions. Once your brain forms an initial judgment, it searches for evidence that confirms it and ignores evidence that contradicts it. Psychologist Peter Wasson studied this extensively. If you decide someone is arrogant in the first 30 seconds, you'll notice every behavior that seems arrogant and dismiss behaviors that seem humble as exceptions or acts. Your brain isn't objectively evaluating the person. It's defending its initial judgment. This is why first impressions are so hard to change. It's not that the person can't change. It's that your brain won't update. Here's what stress does to social perception. When you're stressed, your brain's threat detection system becomes hyperactive. The amygdala, which processes fear and threat, starts seeing danger everywhere. Neuroscientist Elizabeth Phelps at NYU found that stress increases amygdala reactivity to neutral faces. Under stress, you're more likely to interpret neutral expressions as hostile or untrustworthy. You're not reading the person. You're reading your own stress response. This is why job interviews are terrible for evaluating people. Both parties are stressed. Both are misreading each other. The person who performs well under interview stress isn't necessarily the person who performs well at the actual job. But the stressed interviewer's brain can't see that. Micro-expressions are overrated. Popular psychology claims you can read people's true emotions from brief facial expressions lasting a fraction of a second. Psychologist Paul Ekman popularized this idea. But neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research shows that facial expressions are far less universal and reliable than Ekman claimed. Expressions depend heavily on context, culture, and individual differences. What looks like contempt might be concentration. What looks like fear might be surprise. Your brain categorizes the expression based on context and expectation, not based on what's actually happening in their face. You think you're detecting their emotion. You're actually projecting an emotion onto ambiguous facial movements. Cultural differences make reading people even harder. Psychologist Richard Nisbet found that people from Western cultures focus on individual objects and attributes. People from East Asian cultures focus on context and relationships. When watching the same social interaction, Western observers notice the person's facial expression and individual behavior. East Asian observers notice the situation, the group dynamics, and environmental factors. Both groups think they're seeing objective reality. Both are seeing through cultural filters. If you can't accurately read people from your own culture, cross-cultural reading is nearly impossible without explicit learning. In-group bias distorts everything. You automatically perceive people from your own group as more diverse, complex, and trustworthy than people from other groups. Psychologist Henri Tajfel demonstrated that even arbitrary group assignments like random team colors create immediate in-group favoritism and out-group stereotyping. Your brain uses more cognitive resources to process people in your in-group. You notice their individual traits. You remember their names and details. People in out-groups get processed with less detail. Your brain reduces them to stereotypes. Not because you're prejudiced. Because your brain is conserving processing power by using categorical shortcuts. Those shortcuts destroy accurate perception. Here's the practical problem. Every hiring decision, relationship choice, friendship, and trust judgment you make is filtered through these systematic errors. You think you're good at reading people because your brain gives you confident judgments. Confidence is not accuracy. Neuroscientist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying the gap between confidence and accuracy in human judgment. People are most confident about judgments they make quickly from limited information. These are precisely the judgments most likely to be wrong. The confidence you feel when you instantly know someone is trustworthy or sketchy isn't evidence that you're right. It's evidence that your pattern matching system found a match. Whether that pattern is actually predictive is a completely different question. So how do you actually read people more accurately? First, recognize that first impressions are guesses, not data. Your brain's instant judgment is a hypothesis that needs testing, not a conclusion. Psychologist Philip Tetlock studied expert predictions and found that people who updated their beliefs based on new evidence were far more accurate than people who stuck with initial judgments. Treat your first impression as a starting point, not an answer. Then actively look for disconfirming evidence. Force yourself to notice behaviors that contradict your initial judgment. Second, separate behavior from attribution. When you see someone act, describe the behavior without interpreting it. They spoke sharply is a behavior. They're an angry person is an attribution. The behavior is fact. The attribution is speculation. Psychologist Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication framework emphasizes this distinction. Most of your reading people errors come from jumping to attribution without considering alternative explanations. They didn't respond to your email could mean they're rude, or busy, or they never saw it, or they're anxious about responding. Your brain prefers the rudeness explanation because it's simpler and confirms existing patterns. Reality is usually more complex. Third, account for your own state. Before judging someone, check your stress level, hunger, fatigue, and mood. Neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on constructed emotion shows that your brain uses internal body signals to construct your perception of external reality. If your body is tense, your brain interprets neutral social cues as threatening. If you're tired, your brain sees negativity in ambiguous situations. You think you're reading them. You're reading your blood sugar and cortisol levels. Accurate social perception requires factoring yourself out of the equation. Fourth, seek direct information. Instead of inferring what someone thinks or feels, ask them. Your brain prefers inference because asking feels awkward and vulnerable. But inference is usually wrong and asking is usually informative. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that people who ask questions learn faster and form more accurate judgments than people who rely on assumptions. Your brain's pattern matching is fast. But it trades speed for accuracy. Slowing down and gathering actual data beats fast guessing. Understanding that your first impression is almost always wrong doesn't mean you can't evaluate people. It means your evaluation needs to be a process, not an instant. Your brain will keep generating fast judgments. You can't stop that, but you can stop treating those judgments as truth. They're hypotheses. Test them, update them, let the person show you who they are instead of deciding who they are in the first 100 milliseconds. That's not slower, that's accurate. And that's how the mind works. If this helped you understand yourself better, subscribe for weekly psychology insights. Thanks for watching.